Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast, in which Craig Touch and myself, Roland Hume, chat to some special guests about the world of self-publishing, being a writer, and things that go beyond that, which is what we're talking about today, because we have a very special guest, Damon Manx, who is a writer himself, but also he's the owner of Last Waltz Publishing, which is an independent publishing firm, which is a really interesting thing, I think, for self-published authors and aspiring authors to learn about. So it's really nice to have you, Damon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It is wonderful to be here.
Well, that is great to hear. And also, we wouldn't be here at all if it wasn't for the man himself, Craig Touch, the owner and founder of Hidden Gems and an author himself. Craig, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Roland. Thanks. And thanks for joining us, Rob. I know that you have led a very interesting life and you have lots of different stories to tell. But I think, what we were talking about focusing on here is the fact that you went and you started an indie publishing company yourself. And what led up to that, I think, is a great story itself. Maybe depending on how you look at it, a horror story or a cautionary tale about what you went through. So let's start with that. But I think in general, it'll be useful for a lot of authors to hear. Actually, they'll learn from that story as well of what kind of things to avoid and watch out for. But also, if they're kind of wondering what an indie publisher does and what it can do for them and whether it would be a good fit for them or, whether they want to start an indie publishing company themselves. Like, we can talk about all that sort of stuff. So why don't you start us off by giving us the history of how this all went down?
Yeah, that sounds great to me. And I like how you put that as a cautionary horror story, because that is so apropos for what happened to me. So my name is Robert Kiyossi. That was my birth given name, and I write under the pen name Damon Manx. So I had this dream, like so many authors out there. We're going to hone our skill. We're going to get a compilation of a bunch of stories. We're going to refine them. And it was my idea that I was going to start submitting those stories to see how I did. I expected a lot of rejections because I feel that's a rite of passage. We all deserve our rejections to climb that ladder to where we want to be. And of course I did. I received my rejections little by little, and they started adding up. And I kept the faith, and I kept refining my stories and writing more stories. And eventually, the magazine started publishing me. And that's where we want to be. We want to see that first acceptance letter come through. And I got that. And it was subsequently followed by another and followed by another. And then an acceptance into a contest, where I placed. So I said, okay, we've achieved this. Now it's time to submit to an indie publishing company to see if they think that my material is good enough to print. Because I've always had it in my mind that there's certain steps to this game. You submit to magazines, you get that first publication, you go to an indie label, and then if the gods are favorable upon you, you grow as an indie author and make it to that pinnacle of traditional publishing.
And sorry, how long ago was this?
This was 1 year ago. I started a year ago in March submitting. The journey has been much longer. I have been writing since a wee lad.
A wee lad.
Well, I was just sort of curious whether, because you mentioned about the journey and the steps and, going through an indie publisher, but you didn't mention sort of any consideration to self-publishing. And so I was just curious whether or not this was all before self-publishing was sort of a thing, or, it was just something you didn't consider for whatever reason.
Yeah, no, I actually, my first thoughts were the self-publishing route is not for me. That was, I want someone else to give me that validation that I'm good enough.
Right.
And for some, that's what I was thinking. What I thought then and what I think now are a little different, very different. So I submitted I had one novelette in particular that I wanted to see if an indie publishing company would pick up. And I started submitting it around, and I got one or two, really nasty rejections on it. One person came back saying this was just too boring for me to even finish. So
Wow.
that was a little disheartening. But then, so I I came up with a very creative cover letter. And since the book was about a baby being left on someone's doorstep, I came up with a cover letter that emulated me leaving the story on the publisher's doorstep. And I dropped that in their email, and right away they got back to me. They're like, "This is the most creative cover letter I've ever gotten. I can't wait to read your story." Week or so later, they got back to me and wanted to publish Abigail, which was my story. So I was elated, over the hill. Really thought that was the pinnacle. And I was so impressed that a indie label wanted to publish my story. I kind of jumped into it. Like, I did a little bit of background research on them, but I didn't dig deep. And I signed with them, and they put my story out. Well, I should have known. Like, they sent me they weren't even going to send me a proof of what they did to edit. And when I got it, I looked at it, and there was no editing done. It was formatted very haphazardly. So I went about it and fixed it all myself and sent it back to them. And they put it out, and there were still a ton of mistakes in it. That should have been like the major red flag.
Right.
After that, the things got even worse. When it came time for royalties to be distributed, they were balking. They weren't sending the royalties to myself or any of the other authors on the team. So, of course, authors talk, when we're discussing it, and I'm finding out more indiscretions that the owner had pulled over the year. And eventually I found out that they were taking also money from the authors to buy author copies of their own books, never placing the orders and pocketing the money. So it took me a couple of months. I'm from the Northeast. I have a very New Jersey attitude, which can be abrasive at times. So, like, I got in the person's face, and eventually I was the first author to leave that company. And that was my experience with going with a indie publishing company. My first shot out the door, probably as bad as it could get,
Yeah. Did you ever hear if any of it got resolved, or?
So after I left, and after another one of the authors left, who I'm pretty close with, good friend of mine, the company went under. They pulled all their authors' books off of Amazon. They deleted their website, deleted all their social media accounts, and didn't pay their authors.
Wow.
So they vanished like a thief in the night.
Yeah.
That's so sad. It's the sad thing is, we have heard so many stories of like predatory people in this industry, because self-publishing, so many people aspire to see their book there. They've given a lot into it, and there's an opportunity for people who are less than honest to take advantage of people's aspirations and screw them. And it's so horrible. There are so many people I know whose writing careers ended because they just couldn't face going back and trying it again.
Yeah, well, you could take that experience and let it destroy you, or you can use it to grow and use it as a learning experience, and then take that knowledge and use it to help others. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make sure no authors who were coming just out of the gate with that starry-eyed look in their eyes fell into that same trap that I did. And although I couldn't, help everybody, the authors who I was able to help, or who approached me and we decided we would work together, I was able to at least keep them under my wing and give them the knowledge that I learned the hard way. And that's why I opened up Last Waltz. It was initially, I'll put out my own books, because there's a huge benefit in opening a publishing company for at least your own material, but not only that, to take other authors under your wing, help them with the knowledge that you've gained, and grow a community where you can support one another and lift one another up, because there's only so much you can do on your own. One voice screaming in the valley is only so loud, but if we get 20 of us, now we're exponentially louder, and we can be seen and heard.
That's so interesting, Craig. I think that's why you and I do what we do to a certain extent. I mean, we have writing aspirations of our own, but it is very rewarding to work with other writers and be able to do something valuable for them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why we started Hidden Gems. Was we were writing, and at that time I was doing my own arcs and my own promotions, and I just recognized through talking to other authors and being part of a big group of authors, things that everybody was struggling with and everybody could use help with, and so it just built from there. So it's a similar sort of thing. I'm curious so you had mentioned that there are a lot of benefits to starting a publishing company, even just for your own books. Can you talk a bit about what some of those benefits are?
Well, okay, so let's look at it this way. So if you're an independent author, as so many of us have been or are, you're the writer. Hopefully you're not your own editor. Although a lot of people are their own editors until they can afford professional editing. You may be dabbling in cover design. So if not, you're buying professional work to be done from a cover artist. You are then learning how to format on your own. You are learning how to hopefully promote your own book. Possibly you have taken it to the steps of pre-launch and actually launch and set a schedule up for how you're actually going to do that. You're hopefully learned how to grow and develop a newsletter so that you can reach an exponential amount of people on a mailing list. And as you're doing that, there's a lot of costs involved. Your cover artist, your editor, your MailChimp, Story Origin, your own website. Ooh, that's a big one. Someone to build your own website if you're not proficient with that. So everything you do as an indie author, that dollar sign is ringing up. If you were to open up a LLC or a self-proprietorship for your company and say you became Last Waltz Publishing, well, now all of that is deductible on your taxes. So everything that you've put out to put your book out, to promote yourself, to grow your business, to expand, the gas you put into your car, if you go out for dinner and you're talking about what's going to happen with your next project, all of that is deductible on your taxes, which is not something you can do as an indie author without your own label or your own business, which
Right.
is kind of good.
You can start your own business without starting your own label, and then still make those deductions. But I understand the point where all of those things are costs, and they are not just costs in terms of dollars, but in terms of time, and that time of learning all those things, of going, and even if you aren't learning them to do them yourselves, going out to try to find the people to do each individual thing, finding a cover designer, an editor, all those different things, right? So there's that soft cost of that's time taken away from writing, right? So I guess your point is a publisher will do those things for you. They already have the expertise. They're going to take on that role, and you can concentrate on publishing your book and letting them do the other stuff. Is that how it
Yeah,
works?
well, I was just talking about like the benefits of if you're an indie author and you opened up your own label, like that's some of the benefits right away. It also, take a look at it as if you're an indie author and you want to go and get signed by uh, a label, a small label, Last Waltz Publishing, a Gloom House. Maybe you want to try to go a little bigger with Crystal Lake Publishing. There's a lot of reputable ones out there, and you're going to find just as many predators out there. But that's it. You'd sign a contract and you would, if once you're happy with the terms, the indie label would take care of your editing, would take care of your cover design. Hopefully they've got something in place where they're going to take care of the promotion of your pre-launch of your book, the launch of your book, and to keep promoting that once it's been out there. Because a lot of times it just goes out there and then they're on to the next book and your book is quickly forgotten. These are all things, So that's a
Right.
benefit of going with a reputable indie label, or do you want to
Right.
do that all on your own?
Yeah, exactly. And then the indie label is just basically recouping their cost from the sale of your book. Right? You're not paying that up front as the author for all those
Yeah.
services.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is the difference in terms of royalties? Because I know if you go to like one of the big five, I think you generally get like 10% royalties. And
Right.
I know that some independent publishers, give more royalties, which can be of benefit, I guess. Or
Yeah, I've received contracts from submitted stories to other companies who have wanted to give me 30% for my story. Some, I mean, you can negotiate higher than that. If you could get a little higher than 30, good for you. That's really good, you know. Um, but definitely do your diligence and do your work. If you're trying to go that route and you want to, you've got it set in your mind that self-publishing is out. I'm definitely going for at least an indie label, or I'm going to shoot the moon and go for a slightly larger company to put out my work. But the bigger, like you said, the bigger the company, the less royalty you're going to get, for sure.
and I think there's, to a certain extent, I personally have lost a lot of faith in the big publishing companies. I mean, I've worked with some of them independently, and they're getting rid of proofreaders, and their covers might not necessarily seem to write things. Sometimes even the big publishers don't do any form of advertising. When they do advertising, they just don't get it. I mean, for me, I know, and I think Craig's the same, but like there's a bit of a control freak aspect to it, wanting to self-publish, but also there's the case that you feel like these publishers that you're giving your life's work to don't necessarily have the skills or the knowledge to give you a fair crack of the whip. And then a lot of independent places can either not know anything, or they can know enough to do a better job for you than a bigger publisher might.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that's a really good point. The traditional publishers it's changed so much. For a lot of us, the standard was to read Stephen King's On Writing, and you'll be filled with a sense of like, oh, I can do this. Stephen King's just a regular guy who got a really good break, and he got, $4 million for Carrie, but even since he wrote that book, things are very different. I work with an agent, so about a nonfiction, and he's represents some big books. Like he works with Trevor Noah. He's did the book Dope Sick that's been on Netflix, and he tell you, I mean, like right now, the traditional publishers are looking to sign people with 1 million+ followers on Twitter or TikTok, and if you're not, as an author, going to sell 30,000 copies on release date, they really don't want to take a chance on you. And that's really sad because, now we've got just celebrities putting out books. And if I haven't, been the lead singer of Kiss for 35 years, nobody wants to buy my book. So
Yeah, we hear similar stories all
Yeah,
the time.
I'm sure.
The advances have gone down. The amount of promotion that they're doing for your books have gone down, and they still, they expect you as the author to do far more for far less these days.
And you wonder what the appeal is. And sometimes the books that get out, I went to school with Minnie Driver, and I just read her biography, and it took me an hour to read because it was so small and it was done by Harper One or something. And you're like, that's not giving her as an author fair representation. It seems like a money grab to a certain extent.
I think it's definitely a money grab. I think they're grabbing every person who might sell 30,000 of a memoir and just giving them a book deal. I recently went to a book signing with Norman Reedus from The Walking Dead, who really nice guy. Norman is very, very cool, very down to earth. Ghostwriter, of course, is included in the credits of the book. And I had a really hard time reading it. Just wasn't. I'm also not a fan of the style that it was written in, but it just it didn't appeal to me, and I couldn't finish it.
Yeah, they're selling it on name, right? That's really all it is. He's got the followers already. That's all that matters, like you said. So if you are, as an indie publisher, you're taking on the costs of doing all these extra things for your authors, right? And then obviously that's one of the reasons why they don't get as high a percentage as they would self-publishing, and that's fair enough. And then if you, like, as a small publisher, I'm curious about whether you offer an advance. Probably not, would be my guess, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, I've never offered an advance on any of the authors that I've signed. I do occasionally anthologies where that'll offer a flat rate for your submitted material. Of course, so there's a deal. Anthologies are different than if I signed on a author to release a novel or a novella. Usually that's just a straight, we're going to do the royalty split, and author copies are available to you at cost. And, I would supply a couple copies out of my pocket for the author, give them proofs to make sure that they're happy with the product. And also, once the product is finished, I'd send them a couple copies as well.
And are you able to do anything with paperbacks in terms of, getting them into stores, or is it more a matter of just sort of publishing them through, the online paperback distributors that most indie or most self-publishers would use?
Yeah. So in the beginning, we all start with Amazon, which it's an easy platform to learn. KDP is good. And, to be quite honest, where are most people buying their books these days? They're not leaving the house. Most people are buying them at Amazon. So if you can put a good product out on Amazon, as much as I hate to endorse the giant, but there's no avoiding it. But also, there's other companies now. We are now stepping into having our books available through Barnes and Noble and the Ingram platform by using Ingram Spark or Lulu or the Barnes and Noble Press. You can now do your paperbacks, your hardcovers, even your ebooks, that have them available through the Barnes and Noble Press, Ingram platform, and they are also available to buy on Amazon. So we're actually doing that now. I'm in the process of learning all of that. So there's another aspect too. Like, it's the whole learning curve. Like, as a self-publishing author, you have to learn everything on your own and then go and do it. And if you've got the time, I say do it. Yeah, definitely do it. But if you don't, it's nice to have somebody help you, and it's nice to have a team working with you.
Well, exactly. That's what I was saying earlier with that's a soft cost that not everyone thinks about. They're like, well, they're going to take a bigger percentage, and so I can do all these things myself, and I'll just learn how to do them. And it's like, you can, absolutely you can. but it's going to take you time. And even if you're just going to go the route of hiring somebody to do each thing, there's two problems that could come from that. One is, again, it's time of finding the right person, not getting ripped off, whatever. But there's also the idea that, now you're putting out all of that money ahead of publication. You're taking on all of that financial risk, which is fine for some people. But for others who can't afford that, if they went with a publisher, they would do all that for them, assuming they could get signed. They would take that on. They don't have to put that money up front to get a cover design and to get the editing done and to get this and that's and all that stuff. So, there's that benefit too. And, as you were saying earlier, a lot of time when people start, they'll start off by cutting those corners. They'll do their own covers and they'll not do an editor or whatever. And then that kind of shoots themselves in the foot, because then they end up with a poor product that doesn't sell as well as it could have. And that might sort of affect how they think about whether this career is for them. Maybe if they had done things right, either by spending the money or by going with a small publisher that could have done it for them, they could have had a more successful launch, given them the confidence to do better, to do more, and to go forward. And then they end up instead, thinking, oh, it didn't work, forget it.
And because you can learn everything yourself. But I mean, for me, I published 11 books before I published my first bestseller. So I learned what I needed to do, but it took 11 books and 5 years.
Well, congratulations. And that had to be so rewarding too, though. I mean, not maybe the 11 up to, but when you reach that point and you have your bestseller and you have all that knowledge too, so that was a lot of learning that you undertook.
Because I'm very stubborn. But the advantage of going to somebody like you is you have that knowledge that you can help share with somebody new.
Well, yeah, that's the idea. When you go with a publishing company, the idea is now you've got somebody who knows 4 different editors, has 5 different cover designers, all working on the team. We have people who can help, do beta reading for you. We have ARC reviewers who we send your books out to, who will have those reviews on release day, so there's a lot. And if you're just getting started, it can be overwhelming, because I really feel like authors should be writing. If it's taken away from you creating, I can only just emphasize take away. It takes away.
Also, we writers tend to to procrastinate, and doing these things ourselves is a great idea, a great way to come up with reasons to procrastinate.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. And so I would imagine, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but from my own experience of the amount of time I get to write now running a business, which is 0, you're probably not getting as many books, if any, of your own books written these days, as you're trying to learn all this stuff and publish other people's books and stuff, right? So that's probably, so, well, you can tell me, but I would imagine that's in terms of whether people want to sort of go the route of starting an indie pub. If they still want to write, that might be something they want to think about in terms of a trade offering.
Yeah, boy, I'd like to tell you that it's different, but that is the case. I'm fortunate that I did a little bit of stockpiling of my stories before I actually ventured into opening up the publishing company. So I have a 4-book series that's still sitting on the shelf, getting ready to come out. But as far as writing new stuff, and I'm not fast when it, like a lot of guys will see a submission and then write it that day and then send it out. I'm not that guy. I would say maybe if I get 1 to 2 days now a week where I write some, that's about it right now. Yeah. But I still, I have aspirations that will change.
So do I. I've had those aspirations for years now. I'm going to get back to writing. I'm going to get back to writing. So I'm curious about what your process is for how you decide whether to accept a book, because obviously you're taking on all the risk for publishing somebody. You're, I imagine, not the cover designer and editor and blurb writer, and you're not doing all that work yourself. You have people that are doing it, so you're paying those people, and you don't get the money back unless that book sells enough to cover those costs. So with that in mind, it would make more sense if indie publishers like yourself were picky about the books that they choose. You can't just take every book, right? Because you're going to look at a book and be like, I can't, even if it's not a terrible book, it might not be something that you particularly would know how to do a really good job marketing. Maybe it's not the genre that you're familiar with or whatever, right? So what sort of things go into your sort of process of, is it just quality of book? Is it, what is it?
I'm really driven by voice. For me, I'm going to say it. You know what? It's got to be a book that I want to read, first of all. And I have discerning taste. Like I'm into throwbacks to like Ray Bradbury and, the Twilight Zone. And I like classic horror, where I'm not so drawn to this new extreme version of horror and the splatter stuff. Although sometimes I've been thrown in there. I like atmospheric, and I like gothic, and I like stories like that, and I like mysteries, and I like to feel suspense. So first of all, I've got to be drawn in, and I've got to be drawn in within a page or two. If I don't identify with the voice that the author has, I'm not gonna force myself. So initially, I'm drawn to that. I'm also drawn to somebody who's got a huge social media presence and can sell books, but that's not the huge deciding factor, because that's really not why I started the business. I started it to publish my own and to help other authors who were like-minded. And when I mean like-minded, I guess kind of similar styles, similar aspirations. I know most of us authors don't get in the business to get rich, although, if it happened, we're not going to be upset about it. But that being said, I've got to identify with the story. I don't know. I think most authors are somewhat introverted, which makes it hard for us to promote our own material. But if I see an author who's prolific in the social media realm, where they're reviewing other people's books, they're interacting, they're not confrontational. Like if I get a submission and I really like it, and then I look at what they're doing and they're making political comments on Instagram, or they're getting really confrontational, man, I can't work with that. You've got to be likable, and you've got to have a good personality. Unfortunately, social media is huge these days. You've got to present yourself in a professional light and deal with the rest of the public professionally.
That's just look at J.K. Rowling, the first billionaire author in the world, and now she's a pariah because of social media.
Right. Yeah.
If you've got views that are questionable, you better keep them to yourself. That's
or you make your billion first, and then you go out and tell people what you think. That way works too. And those are good points. Like that isn't even something I really even thought about when I was thinking, what would go into it. And that makes sense though, because especially these days, I think a lot of us here, or we even sort of tell our children, be careful what you say on social media, on the internet these days, because that stuff lasts forever, and prospective employers, a lot of the time these days, they'll look it up, right? And if you are acting like an idiot on social media, they're not going to want to hire you. And so you have to be really careful. So that makes sense that that's also something that you would look for when you're hiring before you're signing an author. Absolutely. And listen, it makes total sense that you have to really enjoy the book too. I would expect nothing less. Why would you read a book, be bored with it, and be like, yeah, let's sign you? I mean, that makes total sense that that's something that you would require.
And then on the other hand, there's genres that make a lot of money. And every now and then I'm like, oh geez, I should just print that stuff. It's making so much money, but it's not who I am. And when I last Waltz Publishing, it's okay. So we're certainly not an erotica, we're not a hardcore Last Waltz. It's kind of, I wanted a gothic sense with a literature base, and I wanted my authors to have unique voices and stunning prose and atmospheric tales. And if I were to go and take that step into like extreme horror, where it's just body horror just for the sake that it sells, or to put out a erotica because it makes a lot of money, I wouldn't be being true to myself. So I couldn't do that.
And
I think that's the wrong.
Well, I was just going to say, you wouldn't be being true to the authors either, because you probably wouldn't be as effective working for them to sell, to market those books and sell those books, because that's not your area of expertise, right? So you're focusing on what you know best, and that's the way you're going to do best for your authors, which is commendable in my opinion.
And it's funny, Ray Bradbury, like those really satisfying books. And I think you're right. I remember Stephen King, because you mentioned on writing and stuff like that. He said you can either make a book scary or you can make it gory. And he used to pass off a lot of his books and get them published because they were gory. But it's the scary ones, and it's the ones that really get into your head that he's so good at, that are brilliant. And Ray Bradbury like lays things out, and they're so satisfying as you read his science fiction stories, because you figure things out and you see them from different ways. And that's different to just being like something that's gratuitous for the sake of it.
Yeah, anytime anybody asks me, what's your favorite book, I don't even have to hesitate by saying it. Well, it's easy. Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Oh yeah.
Which it's just to me, every sentence is perfect, and it's so thought out, and which just lead into paragraphs that are perfect, pages and chapters, and it's scary and it's atmospheric, and it captures that sense of when you were a child, and Halloween just held so much mysticism and intrigue, and it will forever be my favorite book of all time.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's great. Even like the big publishers, I think a lot of them focus on, one thing. They don't. Most of them, I don't think, publish all the different genres, or they have different sort of publishing arms that do this and do that, right? And that could be, in your future too, as you grow as a company, you might find that you have to hire other, people that are the gatekeepers, and they might have a different genre of specialty, right? And then you would, if for them it was romance, then that stuff would go to them, right? And the other stuff would come to you, and that's how you grow as a business. And that's doing it not just right for you, but it's doing it right for the authors. And that's I think always the best way to go.
Yeah, and also, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because when I've taken on authors, I think the second author that I did take on, his name's Jack Wells. He writes he writes a little bit of everything, but right now we're doing his series, which is a mystery noir series. And Jack has, become much more than just one of my authors. He's worked on the team in the editing and arc reading. He's like my right hand man. So, it's more than just like, okay, you're an author and I'm your publisher, with when you're at last waltz, your family, but it really is, I hate to be that cliche, but I'm trying to grow a team, and with that team, we're growing a brand. So yeah, I'm discerning about the authors that I sign on, but it's like you're also discerning about who you eat dinner with at your kitchen table, because that's what I'm looking to do is really build a tight knit group of authors, and who help each other, and who in turn become invaluable to the label.
Right. So, if you were to give some advice to an author that was looking to join an indie label, let's assume that they don't write in a genre that you handle. What would you tell them to look for? What are the sort of like the red flags about what to stay away from, and B, the more positive things to specifically look out for in a publisher that you'd want to work with. Do you have any sort of advice on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, like the first thing I would tell somebody, if you've got interest or you're interested in a particular label, you are either going to submit to them or you have and are in negotiations. Take a look at what they've put out. Take a look at like their most recent book. Take a look at their oldest book. Buy those. You can buy them off of Amazon and have them shipped to your house in a couple days. Also, they should be very welcoming to have you talk to any of the authors on their label. You can find all of those people on social media. Talk to these authors and say, how has your experience been working with them? People are going to be honest with you. If they're unhappy, they're going to be even more honest with you. Either way, you're going to get a good view of what that is. If I would look at what they do as far as promotion for their authors. Some of your bigger indie publishing companies are, raising money for those books. Like Crystal Lake is, raising money to really promote books, and that's huge. That's so helpful, and that helps them get even bigger names on their label. And that's what you want. You want to be surrounded by uh, larger authors than yourself on a label so that it elevates you. If you're skeptical about the validity of a label, you can always go on Google and go to the state and the city that the company is supposed to be from and check out if they're actually in business. Just because they're ABC LLC, well, check if ABC is registered as an LLC.
Yeah.
If I had done that, I would have saved myself 6 months of pulling my hair out. And if you see it, it didn't end out so well.
It just migrated south.
It just all fell. But yeah, check to see if they're an LLC. All those things. Also, they're going to have a social media sites. Check out how they conduct themselves on social media. If their posts are professional, or if they're kind of like, oh, whoa, what's going on here? It's a little outlandish. There may give you reason for pause. And also check out their websites. You may go to the website and see it's not even up and running anymore. There's a lot of ways you can check it out, see how they're doing. But the inside route. Talk to the authors who are on the team. Check out the books that they put out and see how they're formatted. See how they're edited. Is there a mistake every other page? That'll give you an indication of what's going on.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Caveat emptor, I guess. Let the buyer beware. You have to do your due diligence. Unfortunately, we are running up to the end of the hour. We don't want to cut things short because what you're saying is fascinating, and I think really valuable advice for everyone listening, because there's a lot of appeal to go to that, but so many, you need to do your due diligence first. I was going to say, Rob, if somebody is listening to this and they're like, I've got just the book to reach out to Last Waltz Publishing with, where can they find you? What is the submission protocol like? What do they need to do?
All right. Well, I would say go to our website, which is www.lastwaltzpublishing.com. There is a submissions page on there. There's a contact page. You could reach me by email at lastwaltzpublishing@gmail.com. And also you could check out my author page, which is Damon Manx, www.daemonmanx.com. I'm on social media under both Damon Manx and Last Waltz Publishing, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Yeah, I'm also on TikTok, but we're not going to mention it.
Well, we'll make sure to put links down below. And to everybody listening to this, make sure that if you found what Rob's been talking about valuable, leave him a comment and let him know. Craig, do you have any additional questions or thoughts before we wrap things up?
No, I mean, I think we covered a lot of it that everybody would want to know in terms of whether or not going with an indie publisher is right for them, and how to choose that. And if anybody is thinking about starting an indie publishing, I think company, this is sort of gives you a lot of insight of what goes into it and what they have to do and what they have to maybe sacrifice to do it. But yeah, other than that, I'm just gonna run off and check out Rob's TikTok videos. It sounds like he doesn't want me to look, so now I want to.
I only don't mention that because it's like it's my least successful platform.
Yeah, no,
but I've got some really nice bunnies and deer videos on there.
So, and you're probably dancing in a few of them, right? So
probably
I can imagine
not.
that. I can see that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Rob. This has been really, really great. And hopefully the people listening, whether they're watching on YouTube or listening on wherever they listen to their podcasts, found this just as valuable as we did. So thank you so much for coming here.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
And we will be back next week with another episode of Fully Booked. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and watch out for us returning then. Thank you so much for supporting this. Bye-bye.